Hi guys, very warm welcome to all of you. In today's video I will discuss about a book, Civilization and its Discontent. This book is written by Sigmund Freud. Okay, so I'll not discuss the complete book in its entirety. I'll just discuss few of the key ideas, the important themes which are present in the book. So firstly, who is Sigmund Freud? Sigmund Freud was the pioneer of a method known as psychoanalysis. He was trained in medical science, he was a psychiatrist, but he started his own method which is known as psychoanalysis. He was known as the pioneer of psychoanalysis. Now, what is psychoanalysis? See, Freud said that the mind, generally the way we observe mind, is not just one mind. It's not just single mind. He divides the mind into three parts. He says the first part is the conscious mind. Now, what is the conscious mind? The conscious mind is the mind of which an individual is aware of. For example, I'm speaking right now. I'm aware that I'm speaking. You're listening to me. You're aware that you're listening to me. So this is what the conscious mind is. And then beneath the conscious mind is the preconscious mind. Now, what is the preconscious mind? Preconscious mind is the mind about which an individual is not aware, but if he tries to remember, if he tries to reconcile, he can be aware of that preconscious mind. So first is conscious mind, beneath the conscious mind is preconscious mind. Preconscious mind is the mind of which about which an individual is not aware of, but if he tries, he can become aware of preconscious mind. And then beneath the preconscious mind, at a deeper level, is the unconscious mind. So it's a kind of a psychoanalysis you can understand as like we have the field of archaeology where you keep on digging. So it's the same. You have to dig your psyche. You have to dig your mind. So first come conscious, then come preconscious, and then come unconscious. Now he says that 90% of your mind, around 90% of your mind is unconscious. And unconscious mind, what's there in unconscious mind? It comprises of your drives, your instincts, of the forces, of the hidden forces about which you are not aware of. But they are so powerful, they are tremendously powerful, that they impact your conscious mind. It impacts your behavior. Now, what is drive? Because he says all our drives, our instincts are present in the unconscious mind. Now, what we mean by drive? What we mean by instinct? Okay, so Freud says that because he was seeing a lot of people who were mentally ill. Okay, and he felt that there's so many outward behaviors. There's so much neurosis. There's so much psychosis. Okay. The person shouting, person screaming, person don't have his control over his body. He becomes aggressive and sometimes he weeps. So he was very puzzled how we can just explain this thing with the help of medical science. He said, no, there is something else. There is some individual inside a person. There is something hidden inside a person of which a person is not aware of. And that's what he calls as instinct, drive. So he says that these hidden forces inside you, first there's something happens inside your body. First something happens inside your body, and then that thing influences your mind, and then it reflects in your behavior. So first there is something happening in your body which we are not aware of what's happening in our body, and then that thing transfers in our mind, and then it comes out. It manifests in the form of the behavior. So this entire thing, what's happening which we are not aware of in the body, transferring towards mind and then coming towards manifesting in the form of behavior, he says this is what drive is. This is what instinct is. Okay. And he says generally all these instincts and all these drives, they're very animalistic kind of. We have drives of violence, aggression, sex. He talks a lot about sex, and that's the reason he was He's less famous and he is more infamous. He's a very controversial figure because he talks a lot about libido. And when he used the word libido, he is not restricting the sexual energy towards the area of genitals. Okay, you have to understand this thing. When Freud used the word libido, it's not restricted towards genitals. He says that it's a kind of an energy which revolves inside you, but you have to control it. You have to control it. You have to control your aggression. You have to control your all these animal instincts, drives which are present inside us. All the aggression, the violence, the sexual energy, all these things, you have to control it. Else the civilization will suffer. So he renames this unconscious mind as ID, the preconscious mind as ego, and this conscious mind as superego. Superego is your society, is your civilization, which keeps on telling you that you have to keep your animal drives in check. You have to keep your instincts, your basic instincts in check. You cannot become just violent like this. You just cannot become aggressive like this. You cannot just throw out all your sexual energies just like this. Okay, so the superego keeps a check. It's a civilization which is keeping a check on you. Okay, through the means of fear, most of the times through the means of fear. And this conscious mind, this ego, is the logical and reasoning part. It sees whenever the drives comes on the surface, it sees whether it should be manifested outside or not. If it's understand no, it should not get manifested outside, so it will just push it back. No, it will repress it. It will suppress it. Okay. Now Freud says, if the suppression keeps on happening and happening again and again, because there's a limit towards suppression. So if the suppression keeps on happening, it keeps on accumulating, then there will come a time when it will just burst. And that's what he says. It manifests in the form of some form of neurosis, in some form of mental illness. Sometimes a person screams, sometimes a person weeps, he goes into a form of a panic attack, he becomes very aggressive. Out of a sudden out of a blue moon, you see a person is very silent. Generally he stays very calm and silent, and suddenly you see there's a lot of aggression inside a person. He behaves very, very in a weird manner. So that's the point where his unconscious forces have just broken the threshold. They are unable to contain themselves. It has accumulated too much. Okay, so that's what he mentions. And he observed that a lot of women were suffering from hysteria at that time. And now what is hysteria? In hysteria, a person loses control. The person will shout, person will scream, and person will weep. The person completely go berserk. The person don't have any control over himself. So Freud observed that a lot of women have hysteria. And what is hysteria? He mentions that this hysteria is nothing when the unconscious, this hidden instincts, the drives, they are taking over the person, and the person has lost complete control over himself. So he got this idea from there, from his own personal experiences. So the first idea is about mania and neurosis. Why it happens? It happens because there's a certain limit towards controlling your drives and your instincts. If these drives and instincts, they cross a certain threshold, it manifests in the form of mania, neurosis, and panic attacks. So that's what Freud mentions. And the second idea in the book is about guilt. Now what is guilt? He talks a lot about the guilt. He says if a person doesn't listen to the superego, the society, the civilization, which is telling you have to contain your basic drives, you have to keep them contained inside, you have to control them. If a person don't listen, he doesn't listen to the civilization, he doesn't listen to all the values which are put inside, which are imposed on him, and if he just goes and he fulfills what all is there inside him, he feels a tremendous amount of guilt, and guilt is very powerful. So now he mentions that there is always a sort of a conflict inside a person, because if he suppresses, then it results in some form of a mental illness, and if he goes and satisfies his urges, then it comes back in a form of then it comes back in some form of guilt. So now what should a person do? He's in a kind of a conflict. He can sublimate that energy into something creative. He can divert into something more meaningful and useful. But he also mentions that it is not possible for the majority of people. He mentioned that only very highly creative people can do that. For most of the people, it's not possible to do. And he also says that it is the price which we have paid for being civilized. We are civilized, we are secure, we have more safety, we have more comfort, we have more luxury, but we have more mental illness. And it's coming because we have to control our basic drives. So he says that mental illness is the byproduct of being civilized, and the more we will become civilized, the more we will have mental illness, because the more we have to then control our subconscious, this unconscious instincts. He says when we used to stay in the jungle, when people were like aboriginals and we were in a very primal state, he says we don't have that amount of mental illness. Mentally we were more healthy. He mentions this thing. But we were not secure, because when you are staying in a jungle, there are chances that some bigger predator will kill you. You don't have security of food and luxury of temperature control and everything like that. So you are not secure. The risk of death was high. You can die an early death. But he says that the mental illness was very less, because people were not controlling themselves that much. Now we are civilized, we are secure, but this is the price which we have to pay. So he doesn't give you any kind of optimistic idea. He's not very optimistic, in the sense that he says once we become more civilized, and we are becoming definitely more civilized with the rise of science, technology and all those things. So he says the mental illness will still be there, and he mentions that the more civilized we are, the more we have to control ourselves, and then more we will have mental illness. So he's not optimistic. He's a very realistic kind of person. Finally, the idea of it's a very powerful idea. He mentions about life drive, life instinct, and death drive, death instinct. Now what is this life instinct and death instinct? Because it's frequently mentioned whenever the work of Freud is being mentioned. Freud says that we all have humans have a very strong desire to live, right? And that desire is present even in the very, very primal cell as well. When billions of years ago the life originated on Earth, around 4 billion years ago, so that life instinct, the drive to live, was present even in the single cell. And since life evolved and 4 billions later we have evolved into human beings, so he says that drive to survive, that drive to live is very strong inside us, and we all know this thing, we all want to live. But simultaneously he mentions that there is a death drive present in humans. Now what is a death drive? He says that inside humans there is a drive to destroy, there is a drive to destruct, there is a drive to manifest the aggression. And you can manifest in two ways. He says either you will manifest outwards on other people, or you will manifest on yourself. And that's what he mentioned as depression as well. Depression is when aggression turned inwards. He mentions this thing, that we have a drive to live, to combine things, unify things, but simultaneously in humans we have a drive to completely destruct things, destroy things. Either we will destroy, and that's coming due to aggression. Either we will destroy the others, or we will destroy ourselves. And when aggression turned inwards, he mentioned that's what depression is. So that's very strange. It's a conflicting idea, because how this can be possible. And he mentions this thing because you see, you have to understand how he's conceiving this idea. Freud has written this book around 1930s, and that's the time when First World War was over and world was on the brink of Second World War. So he was seeing a lot of death and destruction in his environment. So an environment influences a person. And also he has seen a lot of soldiers who returned from First World War, and at night they used to wake up and their hearts were racing, there were a lot of palpitations, they were sweating, and they were breathing very fast. So it was a kind of a panic attack. And he says that soldiers who came back from First World War, they were facing all this. So now it's known as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So he has seen all these things, and he was not able to understand why a person will do something which he knows is going to cause him trouble, which is he knows will cause him trauma, but still the person has no control over himself and he does it again and again and again and again. He couldn't find the answer toward this thing. Why a person will do something like that? The person knows this thing, it's going to harm him, it's going to cause him trauma, but still the person has no control over himself. He does it again and again and again. So that's the reason he conceived this idea that in humans there is something known as death drive. And this book is not a very optimistic book. He doesn't show a very rosy picture about humanity, about civilization. He very honestly writes exactly what he experiences, he feels and observes. So that's the reason he is very often criticized. He is considered as a controversial writer, and you can also feel sometimes that he's very gloomy as well. The thoughts are not very optimistic. They sound very pessimistic. A lot of what he says cannot be proven, cannot be disproven. Because we cannot do scientific experiments on whatever Freud has mentioned. But still, the ideas give a different insight about how human mind works, about how we operate. We might agree, we might disagree. That's all up to us. But regarding Freud, I would say we cannot completely ignore him. He has a very significant impact on the field of psychology. Okay, so this was all about Freud's key ideas which I have gained through the book Civilization and Its Discontent. If you find this video of some value, then please do share it with the others. Have a nice day. Bye bye. Take care.